Interesting politics this week.
The Dan York State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
You know, I was laughing. If you don't laugh, you'll cry. Before the taping of today's show, and we didn't have time because we record our shows daily. Actually, you should know if you're a loyal listener, viewer. Which medium am I on right now? The TV side. We record 4 days a week normally, and we do 2 shows on Thursday for your viewing on Thursday and Friday. But you know, Monday through Thursday, the show for that night, if we're on a regular schedule, is recorded the same day. But we do it in the afternoon prior to the radio program. And sometimes things will come in on the news cycle over the course of the day where we just don't have time to get it in. And this was one of the, I don't know if you saw today, the Giant fan, as it's being headlined, the Giant fan from East Providence who reportedly threatened or allegedly threatened Gillette Stadium. Well, it was first reported that man threatens Gillette Stadium, and he's brought into court, and he's wearing the Giant jersey. Now, look, this has been traumatic for me for the 20 years that I've lived around here. I'm a diehard Giant fan, and dying hard is the theme these days, and we thought maybe this thing was going to turn around, but it's already looking like a repeat of last year and all of that. And living, literally, my door is 18 minutes to Gillette Stadium. It's like, I have to go 3.5, 4 hours to get my thing. So it's been a hard time for me. And to see that now the new headline is, because a guy walked in with his Giant jersey, Giant fan threatens Gillette Stadium. It's like, you know, it's just getting worse and worse, and we're still at 80 degrees in September. I don't know how this is going to get any better. I mean, I don't know how many times I can throw the catch at you guys and just try to regroup on all this. I mean, it's not laughing matter, but if you look at the guy's tweets, he's a little over the top. I'm guessing that it'll be a semi-slap on the wrist, but what he said to the police officer was not so smart, but not unlike something I've seen at Giant Stadium pre, during, and post, as if Gillette is whatever. Anyway, you know, I got a fellow Jersey guy here. Joe Cammarano is my friend and political science chair, and I didn't even, you know, Giant fan, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what?
You know, I don't
Giant fan threatens Gillette Stadium. We need that like a hole in the head right now.
I don't have any expectations that a Giants fan is going to be coherent. I've been to enough games. I've been to enough tailgates up there. But that's true of most football teams. Pittsburgh's the same way. Buffalo's the same way.
Well, the Eagles are the worst.
Yeah, the Eagles are the worst.
Philly is the worst.
No offense.
No, all offense. All offense. The Philadelphia is the absolute worst behaved of the group. But anyway, thoughts on Eli?
No.
Okay, good. All right. So here was the headline I planned to start the show with. Check this out. This is the mayor of Providence. By the way, just because the Associated Press and the Journal report a narrative on this doesn't mean it's brand new news. But there's some, I guess, percolating frustration with the mayor of Providence toting around his little boy. Here was months ago an example of a really important press conference with kid in tow.
I'm just so saddened that such a great celebration in our community is shadowed over by what happened. I think the most frightening part is you don't know exactly what happens in the moment, and every second feels like an eternity. I want to give great credit to all the police officers who are on the scene.
Just one of many examples. Welcome, by the way. Good to see you.
Good to be here.
Sociological conversation or political conversation?
Both. It's really difficult because on the one hand, the idea of a father bringing their child to work is both progressive and an illustration of how men can get away with things that women couldn't. My guess is that if we had Ms. Eloisa instead of Mr. Eloisa, there might have been a lot of grumbling earlier on. But on the other hand, there are kids out in the world. They do get in the way of sort of other responsibilities like work, and we need to stop pretending that. And so there's this ambivalence that I have as someone who studied gender. Men tend to get credit for being progressive or doing traditional things that women might do. Women tend to get punished for it, and it's probably one of those examples where people are going to defend them because, hey, there's a father with a son. There's no win here. I'm very ambivalent about it all. He probably needs to make sure that when he's talking about murders or stabbings or something that he's not holding a kid. I don't think that's appropriate.
Yeah.
I don't care whether it's
I'm
a
not
man or
ambivalent about it at all. I think it's absolutely irresponsible. One time, listen, we're all human. You got a one-time situation. Say, hey guys, by the way, not for nothing, kid in tow, press conference, staffer, can you hold on to him? Especially in that particular event months ago when it was the loss of life, there's the shooting. This is a shooting outside of school. He brought the baby and put it on his lap when he was testifying on the abortion issue, which is I think is intrinsically sick behavior. But really, what drives me crazy about it is, and whether a woman or a man did this, notwithstanding your really important point, which is the gender study on this is a fascinating one, because you're absolutely right. By the way, when I talked about this on the radio months ago, when I was complaining about it and giving a real hard time about it, women loaded my phone lines. Women loaded my phone lines.
And what they say
about the double standard, that they can't get away with that. So that's its own separate debate.
Right.
But the idea that you've got a baby in your arms when you're talking about important, compelling, controversial issues is a natural disarmer. Disarming, meaning it is almost weaponizing your child to prevent the kind of tough questions that would come from the press who don't want to challenge any person who is holding a baby.
That's interesting. I hadn't thought of it that way. I just was thinking for the benefit of a child, yes, he's not at a very conscious level, but I'm not sure if
I don't
were
think he's
a parent,
conscious, period, to be honest with you. I think he shows himself as more and more comatose every day.
But if I were a parent, I would not want to be talking about a murder with my child,
It's
that
sick.
young child. And so I do think the mayor needs to be a little more discerning. And we had this policy at Providence College about 12, 15 years ago where people were complaining of too many kids on campus. So they issued a policy banning it, in part because there were some faculty and staff who were using the school as a daycare center. And so there is this healthy balance that needs to be met. We no longer have a ban on kids. Kids and dogs were banned for a while.
Really?
Yeah, you couldn't bring your dog, couldn't bring your kid.
Just to slow it down.
Yeah, it's just saying don't use this as a regular thing. If it's an emergency, nobody's going to push it. But this, he does need to be discerning here.
Yeah, but I think it's a whole. I think it reflects. I think he's got a half a screw loose. I really do. I think there's some common sense ways of doing business that this guy just doesn't seem to get, and this notion that the $350 a week for daycare is too much for him to afford. Okay. Okay.
I'd love to have his salary if I were a parent in South
He's making
Providence.
$1.18. I mean, listen, I'm not saying that's in modern times that's not rich.
But do you know what the median income is in his home neighborhood?
40,
Probably not even that.
45.
Yeah, my guess is it's more like 30, 35.
Okay, well, we can
So-
argue over 10 grand, but your point's made.
Yeah.
Yeah, so people are thinking, what?
And people have kids in that neighborhood,
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
And then we can get to the big conversation about can you afford to have children, and maybe we should think about that before you have them. And then all of a sudden, that can of worms starts and whatever. But if you had to say 51-49, is it a political or sociological question, though? But which would get the higher, heavier
I would
weights?
say sociological. I think there's a much more widespread, profound question that is much broader than the mayor. It's bringing kids to work and whether men get a pass when they do it and whether women get in trouble.
That's why I love having Joe on, because I'm like 70-30, it's political. It is a way to avoid confrontation. And this guy is practiced at it. All right, when we come back, some big developments in Washington. Donald Trump tried to get the Taliban to a really cozy spot. What? Next. So this is something. The president was trying to pull off something, or was he? Here's the headline, and we have a, yes, there we go. Republican reps cite 9/11 anniversary in criticizing Trump's decision to invite Taliban to U.S. for peace talks. Yeah, even Republicans are actually thinking, enough of this show. Here's what the network was reporting.
President Trump took to Twitter to reveal that senior leaders of the Taliban had been invited to Camp David, along with the president of Afghanistan. The summit was aimed at fulfilling one of Mr. Trump's key campaign promises, ending the nearly 18-year war against the Taliban. But the talks were called off when a U.S. soldier died in a suicide bombing in Kabul on Thursday.
When he saw that they couldn't deliver on the reduction in violence commitments that they had made, he said there's no sense in having this meeting.
Democrats assailed the administration's failed peace plan.
It's another example of the Trump administration's foreign policy, which is a high-wire act that ultimately is focused on Trump as a persona, but not on the strategic, methodical effort of creating peace.
Criticism came from some Republicans as well.
You can't trust the Taliban. You can't trust al-Qaeda. When you see an attack that happens to gain leverage, you know that they're not serious.
In a statement, the Taliban claimed the suspension of talks will harm the U.S. most and unmask its anti-peace policy to the world even more.
You know, it's fascinating. Even the Trump administration has been leaking their discontent over this whole situation, right? What's your gut check on what happened here?
You know, I watched Mike Pompeo on 4 different stations yesterday, and it was clear he didn't want this to happen. One wonders whether anyone besides President Trump thought this was a good idea. John Bolton, evidently, who's pretty conservative and hardline, didn't want this to happen. It's really, I mean, it's part and parcel to the idea that, look, we've elected somebody who's an outsider, he's going to do things differently, and he is. And that's not always a good thing, and this is an example of something that can have pretty severe consequences.
This is about the outside. Listen, how many shows have we done? Dozens?
No,
is this this is the outsider?
It's going to shake things up. You know, the deep state is going to be undermined because the deep state is trying to run the world. That's what he's been saying. A lot of his followers sort of point to that, saying he's different. We've got someone who's different. He doesn't behave the way other politicians behave, and that's correct. Well, other politicians listen to experts. Other politicians think like a chess match, not a checkers match. Other politicians care for the deep substantive effect of something as opposed to a photo opportunity that evidently was the real motive behind them going to Camp David. So it's really, I mean, this is Trump. This is what enough people in the United States voted for that got him elected through the Electoral College. And we have to cope with them until the election. And, you know, hopefully the damage isn't too deep.
We're going to spend a little more time on the election because now we've got all these interesting dynamics in play, including disposing of Republican primaries and everything else with 3, you know, semi-viable Republican presidential candidates. Well, just going to stick around for a taping for tomorrow, even though I told you we'd do it every day. Anyway, but we're going to have a tomorrow show on that.
Right.
But let's get back to this leadership thing with Trump on this and what people's expectations are. I have found over the course of time, from my little perspective and corner of the world, that the Trump exhaustion factor is now turned into the Trump numbing factor. There was kind of there was the tumult and the vociferous support for him from argumentative members of the base. I can judge this on my phone lines, which by a day-to-day basis are not indicative of the world's tempo, but over time I can feel it, right? So there's this ferocious defense of him and really, really articulate argument about what kind of a mistake the country would make depending on what trouble he was in and what he was causing. Then there was the exhaustion factor, which is just kind of like the now there are significant things that are happening and there's a numbing agent, I think, that's involved.
Well,
In terms of, the people don't even really know where to start thinking about what's right or wrong.
Sure, I understand that. There's a natural cycle of the way people sort of pay attention to individual politicians like this. There's the cognition phase, that's let's really learn about this person. And then the exhaustion came from that. And then there's the sort of affect, the, oh my gosh, please, no, not another one, or the numbness. But we're kind of turning to sort of that phase, which is a transition to the evaluation phase, which naturally occurs around the year of an election. And so this is a natural cycle that people might be numb, but they're gonna have to go back and say, all right, is this numbness sufficient for me to support this guy again?
Right. In this phase, however we both describe this phasing, what I'm concerned about is whether or not people are able to put their mental energy into how they will evaluate. Because the idea that you said, that you made a really good point, right? They wanted a disruptor, they wanted somebody different, they wanted this, they wanted that. They were so,
and they got it. They got it.
They were so
spades.
disenfranchised and so upset that they didn't really think it through. And so there's people watching the show who still think I'm being condescending by suggesting that.
I'd argue they did think it through, and they're getting exactly what they thought they wanted, and now they have to figure out whether it's really what they want.
Okay, well that's a better analysis. Yeah. I think you're right, because I think what's happened is that people are they coming back to the realization that, guess what? You don't play games at Camp David with the Taliban.
Right.
You don't. These moments that you've been trying to create, Kim Jong Un, are like, we know this game now. Now you're screwing with real. You're bringing who in where?
Right.
You're doing what?
Right. And remember, 30% are going to vote for him no matter what. 40% are going to vote against him no matter what. And so it's the other 30% now who are in play. And the process that we're beginning now is, look, this is a pathological liar who is completely emotionally unequipped for this position, is a laughingstock internationally, but am I getting the policies that I want? And am I happy that the government is doing A, B, C, and D? And so in some ways, that's hopeful in the sense that if people vote for him a second time, they'll know they're voting for the policies even if they don't like the guy.
I'm not doing what the high school kids or all young people do today, which is, I can text you and listen to you.
Sure.
Based on what you just said, I'm looking for an email from a very, very close friend of mine. When we come back, I'm going to find this email. It's exactly what the professor is talking about, and the argument is still emphatic. Stay with us. Yeah, and then there's that too, which I think requires a real significant conversation. But Joe and I were talking about this whole Trump dynamic, the Taliban thing that blew up on the meeting blew up, and this decision that people are making as to whether or not quality of life or what they need from government is sufficient enough to be able to deal with this nonsense, right? Mm-hmm. So I get into a conversation with one of my very close friends. He's like a brother to me. These are all my high school buddies, right? And I stay out of the politics. They're all Jersey guys, so you know how it can be tough. But they were actually reflecting on my friend Tom Nichols, who is the author of the book on expertise. The failure of
I think the death of expertise.
The death of expertise, thank you. And who is a professor at the Naval War College, and who's getting a lot of national attention, but who has a Twitter disease. He just has a Twitter disease.
I'm off Twitter now, so I'm off.
And the National Review, I think, took him to, I forget what national, probably wasn't the National Review. Anyway, he got ripped. And a buddy of mine is busting my chops about a guy who I respect getting ripped. Mm-hmm. And we get into this argument back and forth. And, Tom is a never Trumper, self-professed. And here's and I had responded, hey, listen, I support the guy. If you want to talk about Trump, we'll do that. I had said, we have our 40th reunion coming up. And I had said to him, I said, I really don't want to get into it. We'll start to ruin our 40th reunion. And my buddy Tommy writes, I think he might start to like Trump better toward the middle of his next term. Continued economic growth, Amy Conant Barrett replacing RBG on SCOTUS, an actual wall on our southern border, orderly administration of our immigration laws, more manufacturing jobs in U.S., less foolish military ventures abroad, the return of Americans from Afghanistan and Iraq, etc. If you like that kind of stuff. And I wrote back, I shall leave your mic dropped, which is a way to get out of the conversation. But that, and he is one of the smartest guys on the planet.
And he has a point, that Trump is hell-bent on presenting information to substantiate his claim that he has done exactly what he said he would do. So, I mean, yeah, if all of that happens in the middle of the second term.
I don't believe the wall's happening, by the way.
Well,
I know,
the wall
I know
isn't
he's scraping
happening,
money
and-
from everything he could, and he's really starting to get a lot of attention for
Right.
that. But he's likely, when the pushback occurs, to reverse a lot of that.
Right. But again, this is a guy who spent 40 years creating a brand that has nothing to do with the reality of what he actually does. That being famous or being New York's representative of a filthy rich, entrepreneur is Donald Trump's sort of modus operandi. So he's going to continue to make it look like he's doing things, whether or not it actually happens. And, I mean, if people get enough, like your friend, I don't know if he's, above the median income.
Yes.
But if he's well above the median income, he got a great tax cut. If he's politically conservative, he
Yes.
wants conservative Supreme Court justices. So Trump is trying to create at least the impression, in some cases the reality, that he's fulfilling his campaign promises. And so his supporters have reason to support him. The question is, again, that middle 10 to 20%. Are they willing to tolerate certain issues they like in exchange for the most despicable president we've had on a personal level?
But I think it goes to, is there any value at all in wanting the office to represent, and is there any value at all in judging the temperament that the country has acquired, which I'm convinced is a byproduct of this presidency?
Right, absolutely. Well, I would say he's more a manifestation of a larger problem.
Pre-post,
and that is the
middle,
problem of citizenship.
exacerbation is a word that I would use.
Right,
Whatever's
yeah.
been in place, whatever anger's been in place has been exacerbated by levels of exponential numbers.
The reality, our generation was on the cusp of the old and the new way of being a citizen. We don't know how to be citizens. Citizens think about the collective interest. They think about the public interest. And sometimes they even subsume their own self-interest to do so. Donald Trump represents none of that. It's pure self-interest. And so his supporters are self-interested.
All right, when we come back, we'll preview our show tomorrow. Same bad channel. Stay with us. All right, so it's a fascinating conversation what's happening now with the presidency. We are getting into the juxtaposition of a normal cycle of constituent reaction to an incumbent president and the election cycle with a very abnormal guy that we have to deal with. So what happens with the normal process of re-election competition? We'll talk about that tomorrow night with our professor from Providence College as well. So stick around for that, and we'll talk to you on the radio tomorrow at 3 on WPRL. Thanks for tuning in. Good night.